Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Sasquatch Watch Radio with your host, Billy Willard, and the Blog Squatter. Strap in, hold on tight, get ready, because it is about to go down.
Hello and welcome everyone to another edition of Sasquatch Watch Radio. Today is February 23rd, 2009. I believe we have a very, very interesting subject that we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to discuss the subject of infrasound. You may be wondering, well, why are we discussing the subject of infrasound? Some probably know. There are a lot of folks who believe that it is a possibility that these creatures we know as Bigfoot or Sasquatch are able to create infrasound. So we're going to discuss infrasound tonight, and we're hoping that some folks may have experienced something one time or another in their lives who may want to call in and share their experience. You know, if you've had any type of strange feelings or strange type of occurrences in the forest, we would certainly invite you to call in and tell us about it. We think this is going to be a very interesting show, and we're hoping folks will be willing to share any experiences that they've had tonight. And right before I get to our co-host, I'm going to mention it at the onset of the show. If you want to call in tonight, our call-in number is 347-237-5070. Again, it's 347-237-5070. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our exceptional and most magnificent blog squatcher. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Billy. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I tell you what, dictionary.com is great because I can find some really great adjectives.
Yeah. I don't know what you'll do when you run out of the good ones. You start digging deeper. Huh?
Well, there was one called appalling, but I didn't think it was quite right.
Oh, yeah. That would be what I was expecting. Hey, we do have some news items for today, but the first thing I wanted to ask, because I didn't ask you when we were just talking on the phone, this is a 90-minute show tonight?
Yes, sir. It's a 90-minute show tonight. That is confirmed.
90 minutes.
We got the
All right, get ready,
countdown.
people. Get ready, because you're going to have 90 minutes of rocking and rolling now. We've got some news. We've got some news. Right. The first news I think is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know exactly how excited to be, but if this turns out to be legitimate, I think there's actually some information that comes out of it, and that is that on Bobby Short's site, BigfootEncounters.com, she has up something in her state-by-state sightings list that just came in. It says February 2009 from Golden Ears Park near Pitt Lake in British Columbia, Canada. And what it is it's pictures of tiny little Bigfoot feet next to larger Bigfoot feet. And I'll just read a little bit from what's written up there. Up in BC, researcher Randy Brisson and his son Ray happened to be in the mountains again recently, and during their walk down a remote logging road, found some interesting tracks in the snow that he said couldn't be more than 15 minutes old. So that right there is pretty fascinating. No more than 15 minutes old when they found them.
Right.
One set of barefooted imprints happened to be a tiny 5 inches long with 5 toes and went for a long way in the snow on the apron side of a logging road. And then beside that were other tracks that looked like they were from an adult. They were about 14 inches long. And there are quite a few pictures. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 pictures there to be seen. Now, if you want to get that link, one easy way to get it is to go to the blog Squatcher, and on the front page there, right under where I'm talking about this show, right at the bottom, I say also, and then I have a link that takes you right to this page. So you can find it that way. That's the easy way. The other way is to go to www.bigfootencounters.com. And I think if you look in her, there's a flashing thing that says new. If you click on that, you can probably find it somewhere on the list of new things.
Okay.
But what interests me in this, and I'm looking at the picture of the little footprint, and it is a really small footprint, and it looks like, you know, a strange little foot. I don't know what could make a print like that, strange little foot. Well, what I want to know is, would it be common for animals to bear their young in the winter like this? Because that would have to be a very young Bigfoot. You know, to have a 5-inch footprint like that, that would have to be pretty young.
Right.
And if it is common for other animals to do it, then that's just I don't know that. I had always heard they're born in the early spring, and then that way they're getting older as the summer and the food is coming out and all that. But maybe it's not uncommon for them. So that's the one issue. But the other issue to me is that I think this shows that they're walking pretty young. I mean, because that's got to be a really young Bigfoot, and it's already walking. There's no handprints. There's just footprints. Of course, all of that is granting that it isn't a hoax. And it could be a hoax. We have to acknowledge right up front something like this can always be a hoax. But if that isn't a hoax, I think we get some interesting information out of it. Number one being that their babies are born sometime in the winter, and number two is that their babies are walking pretty early, it looks like to me.
Right. That's right. That's interesting news.
That's very interesting. The other two bits of information, news that passed through this week, probably all of our listeners heard about earlier. There are two stories that turned out to be non-stories. The first one was that there was supposedly a Yeti footprint found in a cave in Siberia, and that there was going to be an expedition led by somebody from a college. Well, that turned out to be somehow a mistake of translations and what have you. I didn't really get it all squared away, but the word that came down was, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. Right. And the other one that probably even more people were listening to was about the non-human body that was found in Mississippi, that the police came out and said, well, we just want to say that this body that was found is non-human, and that's all we're saying. And, of course, you know, Bigfoot researchers go, well, what do you mean? It's a body that could be mistaken for human, but now it's not human? The first thing you think is, well, then it's a Bigfoot, or it could be a Bigfoot. Right. But the word, now, I don't think there's been anything in the news about this, but I got word from one of my correspondents that it had been confirmed that it was a bear, which is what I suspected. Because if somebody makes a bear rug out of a bear body, they take the head, they take all the fur, and they take the claws. And what's left, especially if it's decomposed a little, can look a lot like a human. So it could fool somebody who came upon it in the wilderness. So I wouldn't be surprised to find out that's exactly what happened. So those are the other two bits of news that didn't really, have the news items that were really non-items. Right.
Well, it was interesting nonetheless. I mean, I think everybody got a little excited when they were talking about, finding a human body or what appeared to be a human, and then they said it wasn't a human, and just like you said, everybody was like, what? So nothing wrong with a little excitement. Get our blood flowing. So. All right. Well, I guess we'll get into this show, DB. We brought us another guest on with us tonight to help us with this conversation because he's had a little bit of studies in this area in college. So everybody welcome Tom L. We've got Tom on the line. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, Tom.
Hey, how's it going, DB and Billy?
Great.
Good.
Good to hear you.
Great to have you on.
Yeah, great, Billy. It's great to be on the show with you guys.
All right. Now, as we get started here, basically I'm going to give everybody a rundown. It's possible that there's some here that don't know really what we're talking about, so we'll give a brief definition of infrasound. The call-in number tonight, folks, again, welcome you to call in and share any kind of, strange experiences or anything that you've had in the woods, as you were having a sighting or vice versa. The phone number tonight, 347-237-5070. I'll repeat it again, 347-237-5070. Now, infrasound, quick definition. Infrasound is a sound that is lower in frequency than 20 cycles per second, the normal limit of human hearing. Hearing becomes gradually less sensitive as frequency decreases. So for humans to perceive infrasound, the sound pressure must be sufficiently high. The ear is the primary organ for sensing infrasound, but at higher levels it is possible to feel infrasound vibrations in various parts of the body. So that is a little breakdown definition of what infrasound is. Now, I'm sure that Tom might have a little bit to add to that. Tom, do you have something to add to that as well?
No, I think that definition covers it enough.
Okay.
You know,
I got some stuff I can add.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
You know, I always got stuff I can add. Well, I was combing through the scientific articles and things that were based on scientific articles to see if I could get a list of the things that they said had been associated with infrasound. And I got two bits of information that are interesting. And the one is the list of things. And some things will be like a repeat of something else, but it's not that long a list, so I'll just go through it. Anxiety, lethargy. Lethargy is meaning, you know, you feel slow, you feel like you can't do anything. Euphoria, that's like feeling really happy. Loss of time judgment, which is really interesting. Uneasiness, extreme sorrow, revulsion, chills down the spine, reduction of wakefulness, loss of concentration, fatigue, apathy, depression, pressure in the ears, drowsiness, and vibration of the inner organs. And these are all things that scientists have said that they have found are associated with infrasound. And the noted frequencies were 6 and 16 hertz for drowsiness, 18.9 hertz for things that people had associated with haunting activity. Turned out it was an infrasound source. That it wasn't actually somebody haunting something. It was an infrasound. And 5 and 10 hertz for all of the others. So those are the infrasound frequencies, and then the list of effects noted by the science papers that I could find.
That's very interesting, DB. Now, the interesting part about everything you mentioned there, and I'm sure everyone picked up on that, the interesting part was some of those items you discussed are items that people claim that they have experienced when either having an encounter with a creature or just experiencing it without any type of a sighting or encounter and just experiencing it in the woods.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting, and it's definitely something to question. You know, what's the possibilities there? You know, a lot of people think that this creature, you know, based on its chest cavity size it apparently has, may be very well able to create an infrasound.
Yeah.
So we know other animals can do it. You know, we have elephants. We have lions. You know, because lions use it to stun their prey prior to, you know, grabbing their prey. I mean, so there's other animals that can produce it. And from what I've read, you know, elephants can produce it, and it can travel for like 2.5 miles.
Yeah. You know, there's a really interesting story that goes with the elephant thing that I think actually is on point here for us. And that is scientists noticed that all elephants in a herd would suddenly up and run. But before they had ever thought about infrasound, they couldn't explain that. How did all the elephants know that it was time to get up and run without any, you know, obvious sign being passed up between them? They all just start running.
Right.
Without infrasound, without their knowledge of infrasound, I mean, they could just scratch their heads and not know. And somebody would say, well, there must be some kind of paranormal thing going on there, right? But infrasound explains it, and I think that infrasound does the same sort of thing in Bigfoot research. Not that we've proved that they have infrasound, but it does explain a lot of the weird stuff that happens that we didn't have an explanation for.
Right, and obviously we have to prove the creature's existence first. I mean, we are, you know, we're stepping out here saying that, there is a possibility, which there is, but we have to prove the existence of the creature first. But again, it's an interesting subject because a lot of people describe a lot of those symptoms that you read off there in that study. So,
Well,
go ahead.
Billy, let me throw in something there.
Okay.
Not to take your thunder, but I would argue that any endeavor that furthers the science would lead to proving its existence. For example, when I went out with you on several different expeditions and fellows were trying to go ahead and flush the woods with a group of people and another group at the other end of the woods to, see Sasquatch being flushed out by Group A.
Right.
Of course, that didn't work. And why didn't it work? Because they made the assumption that, Sasquatch is going to react like deer and run when it hears a group of, potential predators coming towards it. Well, that didn't work. And it didn't work, and it's a good example of our understanding of the creature, because we didn't have a good understanding, and because we don't have a good understanding, that these, the flushing didn't work, and other tactics don't work. And so, our foundation of knowledge is lacking. So anything that you can do to further the foundation of knowledge could lead to clues on how to approach this correctly.
Right.
For proving its existence. So with, infrasound, their infrasound studies, if, I've always been in the position of, if we get a scenario with the habituation, which a lot of people don't like to hear, but if you get that scenario, then, studies like this, you could further understand some knowledge about the creature's behavior, the creature's communication, various things, which then that foundation of knowledge could lead to testing of hypotheses that make sense, that actually work for what we've got.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. I wasn't really thinking about that, Tom. You're right.
Yeah.
I mean, anything that we can do to further substantiate that there's something out there creating this noise, and then we start ruling out things that are supposed to be, quote unquote, in the state of Virginia, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I agree with you on that. So.
Well, the other avenue here is that infrasound is, it's an empirically based science, and this can be seen as a MythBusters type of, pursuit. It's,
right.
We don't know what really is going on. We can only speculate, but it makes sense to go ahead and try to document it, and whether it proves some success or it doesn't prove success, it's still good information.
Right.
If they're not producing infrasound, or if they're not able to hear infrasound by, wood knocks and hearing wood knocks that create infrasound in the distance, and that's their line of communication, then, this information, whether it leads to, the creature actually creates it or is able to hear it or not, yes or no, that in itself is some, good information that would further substantiate this foundation of knowledge so desperately needed, because all we have is really footprints, other forms of trace evidence, sighting reports, and you put all that together, and really hard to go forward and have a good approach on attacking this problem.
Right. Now, DB, before we get too far ahead here, I was going to ask you something, but I did notice that there were some questions coming across the chat room.
Yeah, I got two. I'm finishing writing this one down.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Basically, what I was going to ask you, DB, is, let's start this off now to where let's have a discussion on whether or not any of us have experienced anything that we thought could be, infrasound. DB, have you ever been in the woods and experienced anything that you could possibly contribute to infrasound?
Well, it wasn't in the woods. The only thing that has ever happened to me that I thought might be infrasound, I got to write this down. Bipedalist just gave me a good question. He wants to know, how do you experience infrasound? We'll have to answer that one. The only thing that I ever experienced is this was the infamous Kentucky situation, and I'm walking up to this place where we had done some wood knocking, we'd got an answer, but we had left that spot because we thought that the animals would go to where they'd always gone, which is really an awful assumption. Of course, they wouldn't do that. But we were coming back to the place where we had wood knocked, which was a nice, stout telephone pole, because it was a great place to wood knock. So we were going to go back there and try it there again and see if we got an answer. Now, as we're walking down this dark road, this is in Kentucky, it was a moonless night. They didn't have any street lights there, so it was completely dark. I couldn't see anything. It was really dark. Just before we got to where the telephone pole was, I suddenly had this thought that flashed into my head, and the thought was, if we get to the telephone pole and it turns out that we had attracted a Bigfoot, that Bigfoot would then be in between us and where we wanted to go, which is possibly not that great for us, especially since the guy that I'm with is not sure he believes in Bigfoot, and he might start running down the road. So I'm having this thought. So I turn to the guy and I say, what I want to say is, now listen, if we get there and it turns out that something has approached here, just stay cool. We're not going to run. We're going to call the other guys on the radio, and they'll come with their night vision stuff, and we'll just back up slowly ahead. So that's what I mean to say. But I turn to him and I get like 3 words out, and he starts stammering, it's right there, it's right there. And he thinks he sees this 10-foot tall Bigfoot. We measured the space where he thought he saw the head. Now, I never did see it that night, but my attention was drawn to this light-colored stump that I actually could see pretty well. And everything else, especially back in the trees where he saw it, it was just just pitch black to me. I couldn't see anything. But the fact that I had that thought before there then did actually appear something that this guy thought was a Bigfoot, and before he said anything, I began to wonder if I hadn't picked up on something like some infrasound that my subconscious then fed to me in the way that it did, It gave me this message that this thing might come in between you. Because, infrasound carries with it also, Tom, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong. Doesn't it carry with it location information, or is that what it doesn't carry, is location information, because it's so low a sound?
Well, it propagates the same way as other, waves that are electromagnetic in the electromagnetic spectrum and in the various spectrum out there. So, yes, it would provide a location. However, just like all energy, it will attenuate over distance, just as not as much. If you ever had a person yell at you from 2 football fields away, you can barely hear what they're saying, and that's because their energy that's propagated has been attenuated. And same way with infrasound, but to a lesser degree. It will attenuate, but it will travel further, and because it attenuates less.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. DB, I have 2 callers that I know want to share an experience.
All right. And I know you've had an experience, but I guess we could hold yours off until we got those if you want to.
We can do that. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go to I'm going to bring John Cartwright on the line. John, welcome to the show.
Hey, guys.
Hey, John.
All right. Well,
Hey,
JC, we know that you had an experience. You had a sighting down in North Carolina near Great Dismal Swamp. We know that you had an experience. Tell us a little bit about that experience, and let's see if we can draw any possible infrasound conclusions from your experience?
Well, the experience that could possibly be infrasound happened before the sighting.
Okay.
Well, at first I had, as everybody knows, probably heard the story, I had a really bad smell.
Right.
And then I started to feel very ill, very queasy, like I was going to vomit. I started having dry heaves for a long time, for like 3 minutes.
Right.
Okay. And then at one point, it felt like I was getting some kind of a static electricity shock. Mm-hmm. Like, all the hairs on my body were standing up. I was getting a ringing in my ears. I felt like I was having trouble, with my internal organs, like they were getting some kind of trauma. And it started having some kind of like, I guess muscle spasms or nervous spasms, and I kind of fell down on the floor of the deer stand and crawled up into the fetal position.
Right. And that was your experience.
Right.
Well, DB, Tom, I heard a lot of things in his experience that were described in some of the science things that you read there, DB.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
So
there is, with his experience, you have to sort of rule out the various parameters that would cause these reactions. With that experience, JC, you had a sighting, right?
Yes, but this occurred before the sighting.
Oh, it occurred before the sighting.
How long before the sighting?
Well, I was incapacitated, but I would estimate 5 minutes. I was incapacitated.
Okay. 5 minutes, and then the sighting occurred, a couple minutes afterwards?
Right. After I got myself back together, I sat back up, and then when the sighting occurred.
Wow.
That's interesting. You could draw. Again, we're reaching out there. We don't know this, but in my mind, I can draw a conclusion that it almost sounds like this thing may have been, hey, let me see if there's anything around here, and I'll run them off first. That's just me. I'm just thinking, maybe that's a way of it broadcasting infrasound. If there's anything around, then most people would maybe just, hey, I just ain't feeling very good. I think I'll leave. Well, does that sound crazy or?
Well, if they have that ability, that's what you'd think that they would have developed it for, to get rid of the competition. Also, you mentioned that lions can use it to stun prey, and I'm sure that if Sasquatch has it, they might use it for that also. But it's awfully useful, if they have it, to be able to get the humans to leave without ever having to show yourself.
Right. Or for that matter, DB, other potential animals like bears and whatever else that could be problematic. Because I think, as JC described, it came in to eat some berries near him, and that's where he saw it. And he's saying before that is when he got sick. Maybe while he cleared the area, so to speak, of not just humans, but bears and whatever else. This was down in near the Dismal Swamp, where we've got these problem bears that are released in that area anyway, right?
Right.
Maybe Mr. Uncle Harry Uncle Harry's having problems with the bears, and the way his, like you said, clearing the area possibly. It's all speculation, but.
Yeah, it is. It's all speculation, but again, it's still interesting to think about what could be the purpose of these things. But
it certainly follows suit with what DB had defined and what I had read. You know, they're using this in developing this technology. From what I've read in the defense area, you know, depending on the intensity and the frequency, you know, you can adjust it so that you know, a particular brain that's receiving it will lose time.
Right.
Because what it does is it screws up the synapses between your brain cells, and your electrical signals go all over the place, and that's what makes you all disoriented. It gets your inner ear and middle ear coordination with your brain screwed up.
Right.
And
right.
So what JC was describing sort of matches up with that paradigm.
Right. Well, JC, thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
All right.
I think I've got someone else. DB, are you stacking up questions?
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's get a couple of them out of the way because one of them was directed to Tom, and we still have Tom right there to answer it.
Okay.
Kite Squatch wants to know, how expensive is it to develop an infrasound detector?
It's quite extensive. I started doing that and stopped about a year ago, and I'm going to start up this spring and summer again on the project. But, you know, infrasound is not an easy thing. You can't just go out like you go out with a recorder and record sounds. Infrasound is a lot more involved. It involves the same types of energy that you have in the seismic, which is, you know, my background. And but you know, you have to have adequate filters, and you have to have you can't. It's hard to make such an instrument because it's got to be more sensitive than seismic, and you need several of these infrasound recording devices because of ghost images, as well as weeding out the noise, because, you know, wind blowing through the leaves makes infrasound. All sorts of things out there make infrasound, and you have to filter that out. And however, there is software that provides the oscilloscope as well as the filters based on Fourier series of mathematics to filter out stuff like that. But it's not easy, and it's not like in the ghost area where people are making infrasound detectors for inside of a quiet building. That you can get away with making an instrument that is less precise. But out in the wild, you have to be very careful. And, you know, it'd be nice to just be able to get an off-the-shelf version from some university. But making it is quite a challenge, and but it's, you know, it's a fun little hobby.
All right, DB.
Well, we can have a couple more here. The first one we got was from Sasquatch, and the question was, how do you protect yourself from infrasound? And I don't think any of us have any idea, unless Tom does. Is there a way you can protect it? I guess the only protection you could have is to go in there with the knowledge that something might happen and you might feel a little uncomfortable.
Well, that's a good question. That's a whole other field, is the toxicity of infrasound. And the understanding of it is somewhat proprietary, and it's also secretive for the Defense Department, I think. But it's something that you have to understand first the cause before you can, you know, you have to understand the toxicity thoroughly. And from what I've read, its effects on the inner and middle ear communication with the brain, as well as effects in the brain, which then affect your involuntary system, peripheral system, nervous system, that screws you up in a lot of ways, like you had described, DB.
Yeah.
All right. You want me to bring someone on real quick to tell their experience? It should be fairly quick.
Sure.
What do you think, JC? Or
Oh,
DB?
yes. I said yes. I must have been too far away from the microphone.
Oh, okay.
I was writing stuff down. Yes.
All right. Jason, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. Tell us a little bit about the experience you explained to me that you had over at Prince William Forest Park.
All right. Well, Billy can vouch for me. I'm pretty good with directions because we hiked back in the wood for about a mile and a half or whatever, and I showed him a straight line back to the car. I was up one night on at my sun sighting spot, and we were maybe 200 yards off the road at this time, and I started hearing things, but I don't know if it was infrasound or what, but I got disoriented and couldn't find my way back to the road, which was only 200 yards away. I had to rely on my friend to actually take me back out. About a week later, I was with the same friend going to investigate another site, and we were probably only about 100 feet off the road when he got disoriented and turned around and couldn't find his way back, and he had to rely on me to get him back out.
So that sounds like it was almost like triggered. In other words, infrasound can it be directed? Tom, can infrasound be directed that you know of? Can it be, directed at one person? They might be right beside of you and the other person not be affected?
Yeah, that was actually MNBRT's question, so I just want to give him a shout-out. We got your question in, MNBRT. Go ahead.
I don't know if I have an answer for that, but I would say my educated guess would be no, based on the knowledge of propagation of energy. It's just we're talking about a waveform, and I don't see it focused unless I think Billy was talking about this offline with me about how they can focus sound waves. He's reading about it.
That's with ultrasound, though. But could ultrasound be used to produce infrasound?
No. Ultrasound. I did
run across something where a guy said that you can produce infrasound with two exactly matched sounds that were in the audible range, but they were not way up in the ultrasound range. They were down like one was 70 hertz and one was something else. And when they interfered with each other, they would produce a lower sound, and that would be infrasonic.
Right, absolutely. You've got that correct. Absolutely, because what happens is the waveforms then combine, and you get a new waveform. Right. Could actually. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Jason, thanks for sharing that. I'll put you back on mute because I know.
All right, thank you.
Billy, didn't that same thing that Jason experienced, didn't that also happen to you?
Yeah, something very similar. Tom was actually with me, but he had left me. This was over in the Varina, Virginia, which is right outside of Richmond, Virginia, when we were out there investigating a sighting. A lady by the name of Patricia had reported, and me and Tom, Josh, Tim, and my oldest son Frank, we met out there with the witness and had investigated, and me and Tom had entered the woods. Josh and Tim had stayed out in a cornfield area and then my oldest son was over in a soybean area. We had entered the creek, the woods where the creek was at, which is where Patricia had her sighting, and just started walking the creek, me and Tom. Well, we got back in there, several hundred yards, and Joshua was notifying me on my Nextel, which we had on vibrate. Flipped it open and talked to him through the earpiece, and he had told me that him and Tim were looking directly at a creature that was standing only 70 feet away from them. They were in the cornfield, and they're seeing this creature 70 feet in the woods, and they're just staring at one another. Well, Tom left and went up in the direction towards the kids so that he could see what was going on. So I was left in the woods by myself. Well, I continued I continued to walk the creek, probably went another, 100 plus yards. And I got to a point where I started feeling disoriented. And the weird part was I was following the creek the whole time, but yet I had this feeling that something was wrong. I had this feeling that I didn't know how to get back out. So I literally laid down on the ground, and I stayed down on the ground for, probably a couple minutes. I then, after that, I got back up, came to my senses, and convinced myself, I walked in along the side of this creek, so all I have to do is walk back out the way I came in. I convinced myself to do that, and as I walked back out, that's when my phone had went off. Josh said the thing just took off down the hill. Right at the time that he said it had taken off is when I saw something in my right peripheral vision of something running down a hill, going from the left to the right. That was my experience that I had, was again a disorientation. But it was almost like a feeling of not only disorientation, but almost like I was surrounded and being watched. And I just kind of laid down. I didn't want to move, and I stayed like that for a couple minutes. So that was my experience. Now let me. There's someone else that's been holding on here for quite a while, DB. I'll get them on, and then we can get to the questions.
All righty.
We got a caller from the 936 area code. You're on the air.
You know who this is?
It sounds like, let me take a guess, Thomas.
That's me.
Okay. What's your experience, Thomas?
I just wanted to say that, as far as infrasound goes, obviously it affects the human body, and I'm sure all of us have experienced it in day-to-day life, because there's music out there that people play very loudly and obnoxiously in their cars, and we all get very upset with them for doing that, that have very low bass notes to them. And typically the bass notes are 31 hertz or lower. And I'm sure they dip into the range that are lower than the human ear can hear. But obviously, from these cars that drive by with that are thumping the bass really hard, people's pacemakers have stopped. Generally, you feel a sense of agitation when one of these cars drive by if it's not something you want to experience, and that's just with someone playing bass loudly in a car. Tom, do you have any comments on that or thoughts on that?
Oh, certainly. Just about everything makes infrasound, and those woofers. I don't know. I've never really read anything about exactly what frequency range it gives off, but I'm sure it gives off some infrasound and maybe a lot, and maybe its intensity is of the frequencies that it does give off is enough to cause some of these disorientation type feelings.
Right, and you can. It obviously attenuates over a long distance because a lot of times you can hear the car coming a long time before it gets there if you're in a neighborhood where they're playing this music loudly.
Yeah. It's certainly. Of course, we wouldn't want to have one of these folks come by while we're doing our infrasound test. That would really screw things up. I'm sure. I would say that yes, it does give off a fair amount, but I haven't done any tests and I haven't read any results of tests for such a thing. That would be a good little MythBusters endeavor to go after.
Yep, it sure would. Well, thank you, Thomas.
Well, I just thought I'd throw that in there because that's one possibility that people don't think about or look at. Also, on the subject of infrasound, I think a common denominator that needs to be looked at, like who it was, were they in the wrong area, did they have weapons on them, were they being aggressive or hostile? There's a lot of things to consider when you consider people who have infrasound experiences. I know that Shaboom had an experience. I don't know if she wants to call in or not, but she had her own infrasound experience that was rather intense.
Well, hopefully she can call in. I know she's listening to the show, and so Shaboom, you're more than welcome to call in and tell us about your experience. That would be great. That's what we want.
All right, thanks for taking my call, Billy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye. All right, DB, I know I'm neglecting DB, folks. I know DB's got a ton of questions, so.
Yes, and you know we're already 45 minutes in. We're halfway through, and I feel like we just started.
I know it.
It's a good thing we went 90 minutes.
No joke.
Yeah. Okay, the first one is from Bipedalist. Do we know how the body feels infrasound? And I have some part of that answer, and that is that you can't hear it, so that's why it's called infrasound. But it does affect your body, and you can feel it in your body. And it's the hypothesis is that your subconscious, that is the part of your brain that isn't actually talking in your head, you don't hear that part, the subconscious, some part of your subconscious is, supposed to pay attention to your surroundings. And when it feels the infrasound, it takes a message from that. And my guess would be that since, human beings have been around for many hundreds of thousands of years, if not longer, we have co-evolved with animals that created infrasound. For instance, the woolly mammoth would almost certainly have been able to create infrasound. And we would also co-evolve with Bigfoot, granted that Bigfoot exists, and granted that Bigfoot makes infrasound. And when, what that would mean to us then would be when we hear infrasound, even though we don't hear it, we feel it in the body, our subconscious would know that there is something very large and very dangerous near us, and it's probably time to start moving away. And that would be one of the reasons why you get those messages in your head. I mean, so many researchers have written to me and said, one of the things that happened that was really strange was I got this feeling like I just wasn't welcome and I had better leave. Those are the words that they used. I wasn't welcome and I'd better leave. Well, if your subconscious is picking up on this infrasound, that would be the message it would send you. There's something very large here now, and you had better leave.
Right.
So that's one part of the answer to that question, which, let me remind you, is do we know how the body feels infrasound?
Right. Do we know how the body feels it? Is that what you said?
Yes. You got anything to add to that, Tom?
Tell you the truth, I don't know. I would love to take some time and look into that. I'm sure it's published. Just like this fellow was talking about how you can feel the lower frequencies of sounds that you can hear from a woofer in an adjacent car. You can actually feel those, and maybe with infrasound, as it gets down below 20, there may be a scenario where you actually feel those sounds as well. I just haven't looked into that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I do know as a bass player, if you stand right in front of the bass amp and you've got it up loud enough, it just shakes your whole body. You feel it in your bones. And one of the things that the scientific papers that I was collecting did say was that you could feel it, if it was loud enough and at the right frequency, you could feel it in your inner organs, which I would think is a very uncomfortable thing to feel. You're feeling your inner organs vibrating. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Can I take another quick caller, DB?
Oh, wait, go right ahead.
All right. Let me see who this is. We got a caller, 612 area code. You're on the air.
How you guys doing? This is Wild Man.
Hey, Wild Man.
Hey.
How you doing?
Hey, thanks, guys. I just wanted to give you a quick experience, and I think that DB just answered the question, or answered exactly what I was going to talk about, which is really interesting. But quickly, I'll tell you my story. I was a non-believer at the time of Bigfoot, and I was working out in West Virginia in a logging forest as a wildlife biologist intern, and I was doing bird nest monitoring. Anyways, I had a bird nest in this logging forest, and this logging forest was private property. So there wasn't anybody allowed in there except biologists and loggers. I was I was checking a nest that I had checked before, and I was seeing if, the eggs were still there or if they had hatched or whatever. I went up to, it was up on a ridge, and to get up to the ridge there was a clear cut with lots of slash and fallen trees and things like that. It was wide open. I worked my way up to the top of this ridge, and the top of the ridge was fully wooded, but the understory was pretty much clear, so you could see in there really well. I checked the nest, and the eggs were missing, which really wasn't all that uncommon. So I filled out my sheet, and I started to go back down the ridge. And about halfway down the ridge, going through the clear cut, something started making a really loud noise at the top of the ridge, and it was making a really loud whooping sound. And at the time, I did not know what it was, and I had no idea what it could have been, other than it sounded like a monkey that you hear like on the Discovery Channel or something like that. It was a really repetitive whooping sound. While I was doing it, I was looking up there to see if I could see something, and I couldn't, and I was really intrigued, though it was extremely loud and seemed kind of distressed. But I started going up there. As I started going up there, it stopped, and I marked a place right where I thought that I heard the noise coming from, and got to that point, walked into the woods about 20 feet, and stopped. And I scanned the woods, and I could see back in there really well, and I just got this feeling that said, you need to get out of here right now. And I spent every day for, 4 months out in those woods, and I rarely got that kind of feeling. I was pretty naive, actually, about the woods. I just thought the only thing you had to worry about was black bears, right. And I was prepared for that. So I just got this feeling, you need to get the hell out of there right now, and I hightailed it out of there. And it was just an strange experience because I was just up there, and I didn't feel anything.
Right.
The second time I went up there, not knowing what I was expecting to find, I was thinking maybe a bird, but I really didn't think it could have been a bird because it was so loud. But so that's all I want to say. All I can say was it was just fear. All I felt was fear. I didn't feel any vibration, trembling, sickness or anything. It was just purely fear. Just my subconscious saying you need to get out of here right now. So
that's very, very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome, guys.
One.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So there you go, DB and Tom. I mean, there's another, so I wonder if infrasound affects people differently. Different people, different ways.
Well, I think there's some research that suggests that the reaction people have, what it does do is it excites you. Like there was this one study where they got these people in this concert and they played them loud music, but in some of the songs they would add infrasound at particular frequency ranges, like at the 5 and the 10 and what have you, right. That they were interested in. And they had people fill out a questionnaire afterwards. What did you feel during each particular musical piece? And for the ones where they fed the infrasound in, they got these interesting set of answers. One group of people would say that they were very anxious and they felt sick and they wanted to leave. But another group of people said, I got really excited. And so what they figured out was that what's happening inside is that you're getting this like excitement. I would kind of guess that it's the beginning of the fight or flight response. So how you interpret it depends on what your surroundings are. So some of them are in a concert and they really like it. So they interpret that as saying, oh, wow, this is great. So that's the euphoria feeling, right? But the others, maybe they don't like the concert as much. They don't like the feelings they're getting. They go, I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling sick. Well, I think that one of the things that Bigfoot will do, I think one of the things that the Bigfoot will do is first they seed you with the infrasound, get that feeling started, then they startle you with some noise. How many times have you heard, and then a branch broke, during the story, and then a branch broke, or then a tree was shaken, and that's when people start moving, I'm out of there.
Right.
So I think it seems like they have some understanding of what it is that they're doing.
All right. That's interesting information there. Did you want to squeeze in one more question before I get this next caller?
Yeah, a couple of people have wanted to talk about the military weapons that I guess we all have this suspicion in the military have developed some infrasound weapons, or at least have looked into it. Now, I've heard from somebody who, possibly was in a position to know a little bit about it, that they actually were using infrasound, at least experimentally, the military, that is. But they don't publish any of that stuff. Or if they do publish it, they publish it into in something that you have to have a top secret clearance to see. So we can't actually see any of it. So answering these questions would only be speculative. But Desert Bigfoot Guy wants to know, is infrasound the same thing as the kind of weapons that the military is developing? And MNBRT wanted to know that can the military focus the infrasound weapons? And for both of those questions, we can only say we could speculate.
All right. Well, one part of that, and DB, you know what I'm getting ready to talk about, is not necessarily infrasound, but what we were talking about before was the ultrasound.
Right.
There is a video on YouTube that is from, what was that fellow's name? Do you remember it off the top of your head?
No, my memory is terrible.
Yeah.
I can look it up real fast, though.
We can look it up and post it. Guys, it's like a 15-minute clip, but it had me glued to my seat just listening to this guy, because he has invented a lot of inventions that he put patents on, and he did discuss one of his patented inventions that was bought by the military, and that invention was used to focus sound. His invention focuses sound waves in a column. So he can make sound travel in a column, and he said that they used it in Iraq to make the troops think that there was ground troops coming from another direction. So they were able to focus sound behind troops to make them think that someone was coming up from behind, for example.
Yeah, his name was Woody Norris, by the way. Woody Norris.
Yeah, that's it, Woody Norris. Very interesting. If you find the clip, and if you can post it in there, guys, watch. I mean, this guy's very interesting to listen to, and when he talks about this thing. But that was ultrasonic, an ultrasonic sound that he was able to learn how to direct it and make it travel in a column. In other words, somewhat, if it wasn't pointed, and he explained he can change the focus of the sound. He can widen the focus of the sound, and he can narrow the focus of the sound. He can make one person hear it, or he can make 4 people hear it sitting on the couch. So he can change the angle of the focus of the sound waves, which is pretty awesome. So,
yeah, he demonstrated it in that video. So if you watch it, you can. You don't actually get to see the audience, but you can hear them react.
Yeah.
You can see him moving the thing around, and you can hear the audience react. So it must have been a cool demonstration.
Right. So that's not. I mean, that's not really an infrasound, but it's similar to the question that he asked.
Right.
Let me grab this caller. I think this may be Shaboom 2. Is this Shaboom 2?
Yes, it is, Billy. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Howdy, Sally.
Doing good. Hey, how are you doing, DB?
Great. How are you?
Doing pretty good.
So tell us your experience.
You go ahead.
No, tell us your experience. Thomas had mentioned that you may have had an experience that you may attribute to infrasound, so I was hoping you'd share it with us.
I've actually had a couple, and I've told DB about both of them. The first one was really before it was before I gave any credence to the whole idea of infrasound. And I didn't even realize that what I had experienced sort of fit the typical experience until several weeks later, and I was looking back at it. But I was visiting a particular waterfall here in North Carolina. It's a very popular place to go take pictures. I was there all by myself. We'd just had a big rainstorm, so nobody else was there. And this particular waterfall was located about 200 yards behind a private residence, and they keep a trail cut so people can go back there. And I was back there getting ready to take some pictures, and I suddenly was overwhelmed with this very intense feeling that I was not welcome and I needed to leave. And the feeling felt very focused in terms of it coming from a particular location to my left. And it was so strong, I was scared to look over there. And I kept telling myself, you're being stupid, you know, this is just silly. But it was just overwhelming. So I managed to snap about 3 or 4 pictures real quick, and I turned around, and I got this feeling that you're not supposed to run. Do not run. Just calmly walk away. And I got about 100 yards away, and the fear just, it was like somebody flipped a switch. It was just gone. And I felt really stupid, and then I start looking into it later and realized that it was pretty typical of what a lot of people report. The second experience was totally different. I was in a location that had known activity. I don't want to identify it right now, but there was someone else there with me who was the property owner. And we believed that there was one nearby. And I was actually trying to see if I couldn't get a picture of it. And I came around the side of a barn, and I walked into something that felt like an energy field. If you've ever put your hand up real close to a TV screen and felt the static, that's what it felt like, only it was all over my entire body. And I stopped, and I sort of stood there a second, and I thought, okay, I want to absorb this feeling so I can describe it later. And then I took a step backwards and turned around and told the other person about it. And it wasn't until DB actually asked me to ask the other person to describe what she saw and experienced when this happened that I found out that I had actually lost 36 seconds of memory. Because she told me that I had frozen in place. I stared at the woods for about a half a minute, and she talked to me, and I didn't hear her, and then I finally took a step back, and I didn't believe that. I thought she was full of it, and I remembered I had my recorder running, and I went back and I played that sequence of events, and based on the sounds of my footsteps and when I stopped and when I moved, I knew exactly what happened when, and you can hear her on the recording hollering at me, and I don't remember it. And I added up the amount of time, and it was 36 seconds. I have no memory of whatsoever.
Very interesting.
It is really interesting, and it is also interesting that I found that one reference to loss of time sense. Just at the end of last year, I ran across it in one of my wide foraging expeditions on the internet, and until I found that, I'm sure you've never seen that before. That was like a very random thing that I found, and it wasn't from somebody who was talking about infrasound in our application. They were talking about infrasound in weather. So it was from some meteorological scientists. They were saying that some frequencies of infrasound can make you lose track of time, and we had never heard that. And here you have this part of your story where you lose track of time.
Well, I found some references to Native Americans referring to Bigfoot as being able to make you forget.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting when I came across that because, like I said, we had reason to believe that there was actually one there. We had heard a sound, and this was very early in my squatching career, so to speak, and I went tearing up there, determined to get video or pictures of it. And the landowner thought I was crazy, but she said when I stopped and stared at the woods, and I do not remember staring at the woods, she got the distinct impression that I was looking at one. And, maybe I was, and it made me forget, who knows.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's very interesting. That's just more information
and more mystery.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing it.
Okay, talk at y'all later. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. Now, we got another caller, but I'm going to let DB get to, I think Kite Squatch had a question.
Yeah, the Kite Squatch's question was pretty interesting. This is does infrasound affect hearing, and could that explain how woods seem to go quiet? And that's an interesting question. Now, one explanation could be that the other animals are hearing the infrasound and they're getting the heck out of there, or they're shutting up so they don't become Bigfoot's next meal. But it also might, I think it did say that it affected the inner ear. One of the things I mentioned on that list was it affected the inner ear, so possibly it does affect the hearing too.
Right.
Well, the hearing, as far as the inner ear, there's crystals in the inner ear. And those crystals, if you lose the alignment, then you can, experience various things. And infrasound, potentially could be linked to this disorientation of the crystals in your inner ear. But there's a communication that is also affected, according to what I've read. But, it's something that hasn't been documented well, or it's privy to the military or whoever.
Right. That's the stuff they're not letting us see.
Right, exactly. Do you have more questions, DB? I've got one more caller hanging on.
No, I think we caught up with the questions, so unless I get some more, we're caught up.
Okay. Let me pull the caller in from the 321 area code. You're on the air.
Well, hi, guys. How are you doing? It's Diane.
Hey, Diane.
Great.
How are you doing?
All right. Tom, I need to chit-chat for a minute here. You know a lot more about this, and I've tried to learn as much as I can on infrasound. I've learned a lot of things as far, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. It occurs naturally, like, for instance, severe weather and waterfalls, earthquakes, volcanoes, things like that. Also, I have read a short time ago that scientists are using it to now help provide early warning for tornadoes, because they found that the vortices that are produced the inside of the tornado, the frequencies are very low, and it does produce infrasound. So they're learning how to use that and be able to detect it and give early warning signs. I am amazed at how much I've read up on this subject since it was, told to me, and started looking at it a couple of years ago. This is all true. Am I correct in what I'm reading?
Yeah, I've read all that, Diane. I mean, all these natural phenomenons, and you just brought up, for example, when you just said that a while ago, I think you may have been referring to our recent tsunami. How
right. That's one of
they think that may be attributed to an early warning system for animals, that they can sense it. I know they were trying to attribute it to possible infrasound or even
a what?
They were also saying something about electromagnetic pressures or something, but infrasound, I mean, there has to be some infrasound created, prior to something getting ready to erupt, I would think.
It would make sense to me. And you're talking, the lower the barometric pressure drops, then you have better chances, again, with infrasound, because, of course, the hertzes are dropping and the cycles are dropping. Right. Now, Tom had mentioned something about the crystals in the ear, and I had, through one of my boys, having hearing loss, being born with it from the cochlea. The little it's like, anybody that doesn't know anything, the cochlea it's like a nautilus shell. The little chambers, if they're not symmetrical, then, like Tom was saying, also people can pick up on different levels of sound, and just from having a child with this problem, I've learned that they have a tendency to be able to pick up on depending on the how bad it is, lower hertzes that they can pick up on. They can actually hear it, whereas I'm saying they're going, huh? What are you talking about? Tom, have you heard about this?
About particular ailments?
The cochlea itself, yeah. Kids being born or people being born with the chambers not being symmetrical, and of course it causes hearing loss. But then also I've read, from studying it, that they have found that some people that have this hearing loss actually can hear very low sound waves.
There's a wildlife biologist that I talked to that talked to me about how, you know, animals can hear in different frequencies. Like, for example, your dog can hear ultrasonic sounds that you can't hear. And deer have a certain range of frequencies they can hear. And so humans have a certain range, and it's not perfect. There's statistics involved, but we generally have a set range. And then if you've got an ailment, you know, this wildlife biologist was talking to me about how, you know, he knows of situations where somebody has a deformity in their inner ear, and they can actually, hear down to, you know, 10 or 15 or maybe even lower.
Fascinating. That really is fascinating. And okay, one more question, then I'll get off, you guys. Do you think that? Go ahead, dear.
Well, I was just going to say, so I have heard of this from a wildlife biologist.
Okay. Well, that's. I mean, to me, it's fascinating. It really is. One other thing. The more we learn about infrasound, do you think that helps to explain years ago, you know, centuries ago, say even, you know, the animal instincts, say, or some of the stories we have from our Indian ancestors that tell of certain things about Bigfoot? Do you think this kind of helps explain it more because we're learning more about this?
Certainly.
Okay.
You know, it's a paradigm that needs to be tested, and it's supported by, you know, documentation from the Native Americans that there's some unexplained phenomenon, and this could be the phenomenon, you know, and so it's worthy of testing, that's for sure, and that's why I was trying to pursue it here, and I'm going to try to get back involved in it spring and summer, and that
would be great.
Yeah,
well, looking forward to anything you find out. Yeah.
You know, infrasound, as Billy said in the beginning of the show, you know, there's creatures out there that use it to stun their prey, and then there's creatures that use it, like the elephants, for communication. At least that's what's documented and what's been gone through the peer review and accepted as a theory. So communication and stunning of prey, and what I've heard from another person out there, that another wildlife biologist, is that the great apes have something, a part of their anatomy near their voice box, that if they pound on their chest, they actually make infrasound, and that piece of anatomy through evolution could have developed into something within Bigfoot, you know, and that's more speculation to be tested.
But it's something to look at.
Yeah.
Here, the two things is, you know, can Bigfoot make infrasound through their, you know, vocal cords or this other piece of anatomy? Can they hear it? Like, for example, you hear a wood knock, and I've said this before, in the distance, and then you hear a wood knock close to you, return that message with another wood knock. But, you know, you never know if there's a wood knock even further in distance you can't hear, but if you could hear infrasound, you could hear it. And, you know, are the wood knocks an actual form of communication? And there's lots to be tested here. You know, there's lots. We could gain some information that might help us get us towards, you know, solving this problem.
Well, thanks very much for doing a great job. I'm going to get off now, guys, so I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Diane.
All right.
Okay, bye. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
All right, we got another caller on hold. DB, do you have any more questions?
Nope. Let her go. Let her rip.
All right, let's bring another caller in. Caller from the 865 area code. Well, let me try that again. Okay, 865 area code, you're on the air.
Hey, Billy. This is Ron out in East Tennessee.
Hey, Ron, what's going on, man?
Not too much. Great show.
I tell you what, man, you get me excited. You've been calling in here. That's a couple of weeks you've been called in. You get me excited.
Yeah, no commercials this time around either.
I didn't have time.
Yeah, really. Well, I was going to share, I had a couple of things I want to say. I was going to share an experience that I had. Now, bear in mind this happened over 25 years ago, and I'm from Oregon originally. And when I was in high school, me and three friends, we didn't have our driver's licenses yet, and we wanted to go on a camping trip in the summertime. So we got one of the boys' parents to drop us off out in the middle of nowhere, and we were going to ride our bikes up to a campground at a lake. And we wanted to ride at night because during the day it's just miserably hot there.
Right.
Well, we're in the middle of nowhere to the degree that we didn't see a car for, the whole time we were riding till we got down to the main highway.
Right.
We stopped to take a break, and I'm talking wilderness, the middle of nowhere, literally. And that long moaning roar that you can hear recorded on the internet, that's been attributed to Bigfoot. I heard that sound, and I was probably within 100 feet of that. And the thing that came to mind first was, I didn't know anything about infrasonics. I'd never heard of it actually until just a few years ago. But this sound carried for probably a couple of miles. It echoed. There was so much volume and force behind it that it just blew my mind. I thought, man, whatever made that sound, and honestly, I felt like it was probably Bigfoot at the time. We all did. Right. We just got the heck out of there. It freaked us all out, and it must have been, you can yell out into the woods at night and make it echo, and you're messing around. This was different. It was like something had been generated just by something with an enormous lung capacity.
Right.
We got away down the road and stopped because we were just winded. It freaked us out. It'd be like running a sprint, and you're out of gas and you got to stop for a while. One of the boys turned to me and said, "Did you feel that?" And I did feel it. It hit us all in the chest. It was incredible.
Well, that's I've heard this more than once. What you just said. We have a member of Sasquatch Watch of Virginia who was, and I think I've talked to you about this, Ron, privately on the phone. We had a member of our group who was with the police department at Fairfax County back when they were having and if Bobby Short's listening, she'll know what I'm talking about.
The Mount Vernon Monster.
Mount Vernon Monster.
Right.
His name is Charlie, and he was present during that investigation, and he described pretty much what you just described. It was a very strange sound, and he's a hunter. He's been hunting for quite some time. He can prove it if you go into his basement. He's got things hanging on the wall. I mean, this man's a hunter. And he too had heard, something there during this whole ordeal back in the, what was that, late 70s, 79, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And he heard, the police department was putting all their equipment away. They had already researched the woods, had went through the woods with equipment, looking around, didn't find anything. They were putting their equipment away. And just as they were getting everything put away, they were going to go to dinner, he heard this thing scream out of the woods. So Charlie turned around immediately, ran back in the woods, and got into a stance, with his, he had his weapon and everything. And he stood right there at the edge of the woods, and then the thing blasted out a scream once more. And he said when it blasted out that scream, the thing he remembers most is how it vibrated his chest, which is exactly what you just said, Ron.
Yeah.
Same type of thing. So, and I know DB has talked about something like that happening to someone else as well. I mean, so.
Well, what else occurred to me a little while ago while I was listening to different ones tell their story, was that I just wonder if sometimes some people might not be more sensitive to it than other people. The reason I'm saying that is I've done quite a bit of big game hunting myself. I've gone into the woods with coworkers, and they've claimed to be adept in the woods and know what they're doing, and a lot of times, they're out of shape and they're making all kinds of noise, and they wouldn't be nearly as woods-wise, or however you want to say. They don't realize that they're just announcing themselves when they walk into the woods. I've been out in the woods by myself on a number of occasions and had, you've heard people say the entire woods goes silent. All the bugs quit making noise, all the birds quit. But I've also had times when a bird or a squirrel would give me away, like as a warning to some of the other animals.
Right.
And I don't know. I just wonder if some people can be more sensitive to infrasound, and other people are just kind of oblivious to it because they're not really focused on what's going on around them.
Well, I mean, it does seem, like DB had said earlier, it seems to affect people depending on their situation in different ways. So, yeah, I could, maybe people do react differently to infrasound depending on their situation. So.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to it. I liked what one of the callers said about some of the stories that you read from the old times when Native Americans will, they'll always attribute things to the spirit world. That seems to be, their big thing. So this business of, the feeling that you're being watched, or, that idea that you just need to get out of the
right.
woods. I've experienced that many times, but where they'll say, the animals, turning invisible, or whatever. I think maybe they caught a glimpse of it like you did. They had a feeling that freaked them out, and they didn't know how else to explain it.
Right.
Just an idea.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing that, Ron. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity. Great show.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Take care, Billy. I'll see you.
All right. You too. All right, DB. Any more questions?
I haven't seen any, so if somebody asked a question and I missed it, please type it up again real fast. But otherwise, no, we don't have any more questions at the moment.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the more and more we look into this infrasound, I mean, there's so many different things printed about infrasound. I mean, even if you do a search, you type it into a search engine, I mean, you just pull up so much information. However, the only problem is is that information backed up by any scientific, trials? But
yeah, a lot of the stuff you can find on the internet about infrasound will make reference to this guy that you would call like a mad scientist. I'm not even sure the guy actually existed, or if he did, whether some of these things aren't still made up. So some of the stuff you can find about infrasound on the internet. It's like this Russian guy from the early 1900s. I wouldn't necessarily buy any of that, but there are some papers that you can download that they've got credentials on the papers, and then you can trust the stuff that you're reading in that. Pretty much. I mean, scientists can make mistakes, but you can at least have some faith in what you're reading in those things.
Right. Now, just so people know, when I was looking through this, Wikipedia even has some information about this. I found one thing interesting, and it's gonna force me to go out to the movie store and buy this movie. They claim that there is a film soundtrack that there was a movie made that they used infrasound to produce uneasiness or disorientation in the audience.
Uh-huh.
The name of the movie is called Irreversible. I don't recall ever seeing the movie, but they're claiming that they did put infrasound in the soundtrack to produce an uneasiness or disorientation in the audience. So whether or not that passes along into a DVD or not, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that meant you had to go to the movies to experience it, or if it transfers to the DVD. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Someone's going to have to check it out.
Tom's
going to have to get an infrasound detector out.
It makes me want to go see the movie, though. I'll go pick it up, check it out. So, But yeah, there's just tons and tons of information on the internet. I know someone had posted another one of the. There's a Microsoft Word. Actually, it's a PDF. Actually, called Infrasound Brief Review of Toxicological Literature.
Yeah, I just downloaded that too.
And I know Tom was kind of talking about, we don't know what, about the toxicity, stuff of infrasound. And this guy, it was apparently revised back in March of 2002. So, I mean, it's got a few years on it. But, this guy, I mean, there's a lot of claims in here in this, studies and stuff that supposedly was done back, I guess, in 2001, I assume. But,
yeah, we should add a few things. Some things that I know that are limiting factors. And Tom, you can help me out with this stuff. One of them is that in everything that I've read, in order to have these effects that they're talking about using extremely loud infrasound. So, up around 110 dBs, and it's at 140 dBs you start having damage to your hearing. So it's, that's really loud. 110 dBs is loud. Now, can Bigfoot really generate that kind of sound in infrasound while also not making a lot of other noises, too? I mean, there's the one side where you say, can he even make that much noise in infrasound? Can he get it that loud? And can he do that without not also making other noise, And so that's one of the limiting factors on, Bigfoot having at least a conventional infrasound producing thing.
Yeah. I tell you what, this one article here, DB, I got to read this. This one paragraph in this article. It says, studies have shown that infrasound, and that's 6 to 16 hertz, at levels ranging from 95 to 130 decibels and up, to an exposure time of 1 hour, causes an increase in diastolic blood pressure and decreases in the systolic blood pressure and pulse rate.
Huh.
That's
what I need. I already have high blood pressure, and I'm going out in the woods, and Sasquatch has put me in the hospital.
Now, what they did was they did this testing on active Swiss Air Force pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And they found out, they asked, I guess apparently they asked the pilots, what did you experience? And they said, well, there was decreased alertness, so it wasn't very alert. Faster decrease in the electrical resistance of the skin, and an alteration of hearing threshold and time perception. So remember, Sally was saying something about that.
Right.
But it says here that a whole body exposure to infrasound at 10 to 15 hertz did not produce changes in respiration, pulse, and blood pressure. I mean, there's a lot of information out here that talks about all these different levels and stuff like that. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I think we're just at the beginning. We don't know enough about it. It's a lot more to learn. Tom, you better get busy. That's all I got to say. We'll put all this crap on Tom.
Well, there are many things to go after as far as developing information associated with Bigfoot, and this is just one of the many areas. I tend to think that there may be something behind the wood knocks. That wood knock will produce a significant signature of infrasound. Right. Is that a long distance communication to their wife and kids or clan? I'm coming home for dinner now.
Right.
Or whatever.
Who knows?
Or there's danger lurking. Whatever.
Hey, real quick, while the show is still live, we've got only about 50 seconds left. Before everybody takes off, next week we're going to have Mr. Hugh Phillips from West Virginia on the show, also known as In Search Of. He will be a guest on the show next week, and he's going to tell us about some things he's been doing in West Virginia. So everybody tune in next week as we bring Hugh on the show. Real quick before we go off live, thank you everyone for coming in and listening to the show tonight. We appreciate everyone that called in. You guys are great. You're great with the questions. Awesome. Great show. We enjoyed it a whole lot. So we thank you a lot, folks, and we'll see you next week. DB, any closing thoughts?
Well, the first thing that I think about is that everything that we heard tonight fits into an infrasound hypothesis. And that doesn't prove that, Bigfoot is using infrasound, but it sure is an interesting, coincidence of factors. Infrasound is known to produce these effects. People who were, out in the field, they didn't maybe not even looking for Bigfoot, but they have a Bigfoot encounter, and they have these effects. Infrasound just explains a lot of things for us that previously we would have said, well, that's just paranormal stuff. And I'm sure a lot of researchers wouldn't even have written this stuff down. So this is a cautionary tale to us. We got to write everything down, even if you don't understand it right now. You got to write it down because eventually something's going to come along, and then you'll understand it in light of that new information.
Yep, that's so true, so true. How about you, Tom?
Well, I would just encourage everybody to pick something that in this hobby that we're doing, because I don't think there's too many of us that are doing this professionally, so it's a hobby. Pick something that, is going to advance the knowledge. It's always fun to get out with the fellow researchers and into a hot spot and listen. But if you can do something more than that and make it into a hobby, that'd be great.
Yep, I agree. Well, Tom, we want to thank you, too, for, I know you're a busy guy, and a lot of times you're away from home a lot, and we appreciate you taking the time to come on the show tonight and join us in this discussion.
Your presence lent the show a scholarly and scientific air that it usually does not have.
Well, I always enjoy getting out, and I look forward to getting out with you all.
Yep.
Yeah, as soon as it warms up, we will do that. But right now, it's too cold.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Tom.
You bet. Thanks
DB,
for having me on.
You're welcome. And DB, as usual, thank you for being the great co-host you are. Remember, you're exceptional and magnificent.
Thanks, man. Well, you're pretty all right yourself. So there you go.
All right.
And I didn't have to look in a dictionary for that.
Not really. I would hope not.
It was a great show tonight, though. Very, very, very good work. Everybody calling in and everything was awesome.
Yep, it was awesome. And I also want to thank everyone for all the emails. I mean, we got emails with information about Infrasound. It's the listeners. Our listeners are the greatest listeners out there, and we want to thank each and every one of you for being here every week and wanting to share information. It's just great. We had probably one of the best times we've ever had, and we appreciate it.
Indeed.
So that's it for tonight. Everyone join us next week, and we have Hugh Phillips from West Virginia on the show. And everyone, good night till next week. Good night, DB.
Good night.
Good night, Billy. Good night, DB.
Good night, Tom.
Good night, Tom. This is like the end of, what is that show from the 70s? Good night, Billy. Good night, Tom. Good night, DB. Good night, John Boy.
John Boy, yeah. Right.
All right, now we'll go to this awesome radio ad. Listen to this, Tom. If you ain't heard this yet, you got to listen to this. Here we go. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
A legend silently stalks the forest around the world, leaving giant man-like footprints in its wake. Skeptics scoff, while the true believers search for the answers, and those who have seen it will never forget. Monday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, Blog Talk Radio. Billy Willard and the Blog Squatcher present Sasquatch Watch Radio.
I knew you was on mute, but wait.
Your hosts, Billy Willard and Dee Dee Donlin, bring you 60 minutes of the latest news and information, newly discovered evidence, and interviews with those searching for the truth and those who have seen it. Do you believe? Want to know the truth? It's out there waiting. Monday nights, 9 p.m., Blog Talk Radio. Sasquatch Watch Radio. Sit down, hold on tight, get ready, because it is about to go down. blogtalkradio.com/Sasquatch Watch Radio.
Now, what did you say? Hey, Jack, are you done with this thing? Henry May? Not tomorrow night, no. Oh, Bob Coyne in Long Island. They're having him on tomorrow? Damn. Yeah, we have. Oh, well. Well, then we. That's right. That's right. And I still don't think they get the listeners we get. I'm going to turn this off because I can't tell if it's playing or not. I can't hear it.